am joined now by North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. He announced his candidacy for president this week. Governor Burgum, thanks for giving us some time for us today.
Well, thank you, Mary. Great to be here on the show with you.
I think just to start, obviously you serve the people of North Dakota, but for Iowans, what would you want them to know about your resume and just what has, I guess, led you in your experience to where we are today?
Well, first thing I would want Iowans to know is I grew up in a tiny town in North Dakota, 300 people. We counted everybody that also was in the Good Samaritan home, so we could have 400 people, because then that way we were slightly bigger than Hunter, our tribal 6 miles away. But yeah, grew up in that small town, had an amazing life there, beautiful community. And then when I was a freshman in high school, my dad passed away. And that was, tough on all of us. I had 2 older siblings. My mom, widowed, mother of 3. She goes back into the workforce. But, that was a pivotal point in my life where you learn. But I saw how Arthur is a town where neighbors help neighbors. Everybody pulls together, and the families that supported me. And when my mom was working, I could, go next door and have dinner with, Helen Williams, and she'd make sure everything was great. Everybody was just, supporting each other. And I think we talk about that being the best of America, and I see that all over Iowa, which is, you've got this, our country was really built on not a bunch of federal government rules and not a bunch of policies and not a bunch of people fighting over their differences, but people saying, hey, if somebody needs something, we step up and we help our neighbors. And I see that, wherever I go. But simultaneously, 2 things can be true. One, we can have a country where great things are happening that we're not hearing about, where people really care about each other and there's great communities. And then we could also have a federal government that completely overreaches on just about everything, buries the country in red tape, is completely wrong on economic policy, wrong 180 degrees wrong on energy policy, and really wrong on national defense, including the border. And those are the actual responsibilities of the federal government. So I would want people to know that, I grew up and I, believe in small town values. And from those humble beginnings, I got 160 acres of farmland from my dad. I literally bet the farm, became the startup capital for a little company, tiny software company, which became Great Plains Software, which I'm learning, people have heard of in Iowa, because our last stop, hey, we're a customer. There's 300,000 Great Plains small business customers now around the world in over 130 countries. And when that company, by the time 18 years later, we were an overnight success story. We became part of Microsoft, but we had 2,000 team members. 1,200 of them were in Fargo, 400 rest of North America, 400 in the rest of the world. And those 1,200 from Fargo all came from little small towns like my hometown of Arthur. Kids from small towns, they know how to work, they know how to get stuff done, they know how to solve problems. And so that was the beginning of what then was, I spent almost 3 decades in the software industry, got involved in building multiple other large software companies that were great global successes. And then in 2016, we had an open seat for governor in North Dakota, and as a complete outsider, decided to run. Told Catherine, the first lady, I said, don't worry, there's a poll that says I'm down 69-10. I'm not gonna win. I have this out of my system in 6 months. And we went from down 69-10 to 6 months later, we won 60-40, and it's been a huge honor for us to serve the people of North Dakota, and we've been just driving forward with a lot of focus on more efficient government, limited government, conservative principles, and we've been passed the largest tax cut in the history of the state. We achieved pension reform this year that been 3 decades in the making. And really are focused on driving our economy. We're on a path to having the highest GDP of any state in the nation in North Dakota. So when we're running now, we look at, I've experienced both as a business person and a leader of building companies, as an entrepreneur, and I've experienced as a governor, that the federal government just gets in the way. There's a very discrete set of things the federal government should do, and those things include the economy, energy, and national security. And so part of running is on the experience that I've had over a lifetime of creating jobs, and some of those jobs, working, on the ranch, on the farm, in the grain elevator. Some of these should all be on, the Discovery Channel's Dirtiest Jobs show. And I said, it would be good for America maybe to have somebody in the White House who's had jobs where you shower at the end of the day instead of at the beginning of the day, because we just can bring a lot of practical, small town, common sense values forward. And I think that's what our nation really needs right now.
And I guess going off on that, talk to me about maybe if there was a spark, an impetus of what led you to really want to run for president. I mean, what obviously you've got the history in North Dakota of serving, but what is leading you to seek this office?
Well, I think one of the things in North Dakota, we're a big agriculture state like Iowa. We're a big energy state. And of course, Iowa's got ethanol, we've got ethanol, but we're also a huge oil and gas state. And also in North Dakota, we've got 2 big Air Force bases, and we've got a big portion of the nation's anti-ballistic missiles. And so we're a state that's involved in national security. We're involved in energy, and like Iowa, we're helping to feed and fuel the whole world. So these are things that I've spent my life understanding, and these are the things that I feel like the federal government policy-wise is 180 degrees backwards on. So there just was a match between what the leadership that the nation needs right now and the experiences that I've been able to accumulate over my lifetime. And I think, again, technology is changing every job, every company, every industry. And one thing I've seen as governor the last 6.5 years is that government itself is one of the most efficient operations, because in many cases, government doesn't have competition. If you're the only place, say, to get a driver's license, well, then you don't have to be good or fast or convenient. And we've had an approach where we just said, look, we've got to treat the taxpayers of our state like the customers they are. They're the ones that are paying for government. We've got to serve them. They have an expectation about service that you might working with any other consumer company, and government is so far away. So the technology background is another thing where I've learned, which is when people worry about government costs too much, I've seen you can take out all kinds of costs out of government. The first year we were there, we cut $1.7 billion of the North Dakota state budget out of a $6 billion budget. We cut it by $1.7 billion the first year, and everything kept running on time, and services got better. So this idea that government has to grow and grow and grow, that's only true if you don't apply all the new approaches and processes and technology that every business has had to apply in those years. So there has been, I guess, a realization that at this moment in time, the needs that the country have are mapped kind of uniquely against the skill set that I've been able to build over a career in my lifetime.
And I guess as we, look backwards, I know in previous elections you endorsed former President Donald Trump, and obviously now, an opponent of yours in this race. So talk to me if that's something that you believe, if you think America's ready for a change, in that office of maybe potentially moving away from former President Trump.
Well, I think there's a beautiful thing about democracy is the voters get to decide, and some of those most important voters are those that caucus here in Iowa. And I've got a great faith in democracy. You talked about it at the beginning. I think the best of democracy is occurring in places like Iowa and like North Dakota. And so we're very excited to be here. Iowa's such a beautiful state. We've had an amazing last 2 days here. First Lady Catherine and myself, we're going to be spending a lot of time here. And I think the voters will get to decide whether or not they're ready for a change.
And something that has been kind of in flux here in Iowa, we've got, our abortion law before our Iowa Supreme Court. I know earlier this year in North Dakota, you signed a strict restriction there with some exceptions. I guess when it comes to that, if you were in the office of president, is that something you see needing federal legislation on, or do you think that's an issue that should fall to the states and kind of for them to weigh in and choose those rules?
I think it's absolutely something that should fall to the states. And I think the Dobbs decision made that clear that this was the decision for the states, and that's where I think that decision should be made.
And I guess in the same vein, in North Dakota, we have similar legislation here in Iowa that passed throughout the last session that would ban gender-affirming care for those under 18. In the same vein of that, is that something that you believe there's a need for federal guidance on, or is, again, this an issue that you think states can handle?
I think that's an issue the states should focus on, absolutely.
You mentioned ethanol earlier, and obviously that's a big issue for Iowans. Curious to hear your thoughts on any policies that you would like to seek, or any changes from the federal level when it comes to our production of that.
Well, I just think there's a big opportunity in the future in all renewable fuels, and whether ethanol, biodiesel. In North Dakota right now, we've got 3 new soybean crush plants, over $1 billion of investment going on for biodiesel. But the real big opportunity for this country is sustainable aviation fuel. That we're not going to have battery-operated commercial flights flying across our oceans anytime soon. Batteries are too heavy. The rate of increase in their capabilities is only, a couple percent a year. That's been the same for the last 40 years. It's not like computer chips, which are on Moore's Law, which are doubling in power at half the price every 18 months. Batteries just slowly get better, but they're heavy and they don't work well in cold weather. So airplanes, can be minus 60 at the elevation most commercial flights fly. So the weight ratio of a liquid fuel versus a battery for an airplane, for example, this is an area where it's decades and decades of liquid fuels are going to be required for a growing demand for aviation around the world. And the absolute best place to deliver sustainable aviation fuels is going to come from the heartland of America. And that's going to be it has the potential to double the size of the ethanol industry. And I think it's an exciting future because, of course, ethanol, you might say, oh, well, that's just for the farmers that are growing corn. Well, no, it increases the value of the crop. It increases the value of their land. That increases the opportunity for all the suppliers that sell to them, seed, fertilizer, all the inputs. That helps grow communities across the Midwest. Helps raise, the revenue that pays for schools and pays for healthcare and pays whatever. So when we can lift the economy through expanding an opportunity like ethanol, then everybody else benefits as well. And so I think, again, this is just an area where we would say, hey, we got to focus on innovation. That's what's driven America forward, not on regulation. And it's a great example, and I think the future is very bright for ethanol.
And I guess when we look towards the future and the potential of this coming election, in your eyes, with President Biden's legacy, what do you see as the reason for that we need a change in that office, or what would you point to as what you see as failures in that office?
How long is your show? Let's just start with the three we're focused on. Okay, on the economy, monetary policy, fiscal policy, the inflationary spending. I mean, inflation is the most cruel tax there is because it hurts the people the most that can afford it the least. I mean, it eats away at their ability, how do I pay my bills? How do I put food on the table? How do I put gas in my tank? All of that was completely predictable because of the trillions of dollars of excess spending that was just not required by this administration. And then on energy policy, again, 180% backwards. This administration, the Biden administration, has sent the State Department to Venezuela. They themselves have gone to the Middle East, Biden himself going to the Middle East, asking our adversaries to produce more energy, countries that often don't even have an EPA, they've got human rights violations, let's have them produce more energy. He's not calling the governor of Texas, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, Alaska, our big, the Republican governors of our energy producing states, and saying, hey, could you produce more energy, American energy, which would be better for the environment? Because if you care about the environment, you should have every drop of energy produced domestically, because in America we do it cleaner, safer, and better than anywhere else. And you don't have to transport it here, okay? Which then also is bad for the environment, to be transporting these fuels all the way to get to our country. We talk about energy independence. Every administration since World War II has said energy independence is an important goal for the country. Not this administration. They're trying to crush, they're trying to crush and destabilize all of our baseload electricity. They're trying to crush and through regulation basically wipe out the oil and gas industry in the country. They're trying to make our country energy poor, which then again just enables our competitors. We're in a competition with China. China's got the second largest economy. They're chasing us. We've always had the largest, most powerful, and dynamic economy. We're not going to be able to maintain that position. We're not going to be able to solve our supply chain problems if we don't fix our energy policy, because that's the basis of what drives the cost of manufacturing and every other aspect. And then energy as it relates to national security. Putin never invades Ukraine if we didn't have Western Europe buying all of the energy from him. I mean, so this is just completely destabilizing. And so whether it's the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, which was kind of a green light for Putin to go in, and then now, we'll sanction Russia. Well, then what does Russia do? Russia starts selling energy at a discount to China. So our policies become a win for Russia and China. So the whole thing is backwards. So whether it's economy, energy, or national security, I feel like this administration, in spite of the fact The best of America can occur every day in small towns, people taking care of other people. Think what the potential could be for this country if we actually had those three things headed in the right direction. We could lift up the life of every American, and when I'm president, that's what we intend to do.
And one thing we had wanted to ask you about, just that has kind of been unfolding in the last couple days, is the federal indictment of former President Trump when it comes to these documents. Just your reaction to that, or anything you'd want our viewers to know.
Well, I think that one of the things that is clear in America right now is that a lot of Americans have distrust in our systems at the federal level. I mean, they've got concerns about, our elections fair. They've got concerns about, are there two standards in the Department of Justice? One for Republicans and one for Democrats, because of course President Biden has his own set of document issues. And I think when we have mistrust at a very fundamental level of our federal institutions, that erodes democracy at a whole. And one of the things that I know when I'm president, there's not going to be, the law will be applied equally to everyone. We have to rebuild the trust in government, otherwise we don't have a future as a country.
And I guess as a wrap up here, kind of the elevator pitch to Iowans of why should they keep their eye on you and consider you as their future next leader?
Well, I think if we look at where we are in the world right now, with the risks we face from foreign adversaries, the challenges that we face, whether it's the border or cybersecurity or energy policy or the economy, you might say, hey, let's think about someone who's actually worked alongside of farmers and ranchers and small business people, someone who understands technology, someone who's built large businesses and has had global business experience for decades and decades, who, and by the way, has also been a really successful governor of a state that is both an energy and a food producer for the world and has a deep understanding of national security issues. You might say, hey, let's give that person a look. And so again, we would appreciate if people want to learn more about Catherine and myself, dougburgum.com, check it out, and we would love to have the support. We're going to keep coming back to Iowa. We look forward to being part of the debates and look forward to having support of people across the state as we go forward.
Well, Governor Burgum, it was a pleasure. Thanks so much again for making some time for us today.
Well, thank you. Great to be on the program with you.